All right. This should be fun.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome. Yeah. All right, we have about 40 minutes with you. It's already clicking down. We're going to use every one, so no droning on. Okay?
I see what you did.
No, that's coming up too, but that was actually not supposed to be a bad pun. And then disclosure, you are an investor in Business Insider,
Yes.
which is wonderful.
A happy investor. Thank you.
It is great fun. It also means that I kind of sort of work for you, so I'm not eager to ask questions
so barely.
that are going to make you mad at me and all that stuff, but I will endeavor, and I'm a very happy Amazon investor. All right, so let's jump right in. So what the hell happened with the Fire
We have
phone?
a long relationship,
We do.
actually.
All right.
I mean, it's a very interesting story. Some of you will know this if you lived in the Paleolithic era, as Henry and I did, but Henry made a very famous call about Amazon stock a long, long time ago. He said it was going to be, I don't know, $400 a share, and everybody poo-pooed that. And of course, on a split-adjusted basis, it was supposed to be, I think it's like $66 a share was what your call was. So he was wrong by a factor of 5. So anyway.
It worked out.
It worked out.
Blind squirrel finds a nut, all that stuff. So, Jeff, so what happened with the Fire phone?
Well, you know, if you look at our device portfolio, let me back up and say a couple of things. First of all, it's really early. And so we've had a lot of things we've had to iterate on at Amazon. You guys may remember something called auctions. That didn't work out very well. Then we launched something called Z Shops, which morphed out of that. And then from Z Shops, which didn't work, we launched Marketplace, which became our third-party seller business, which now represents more than 40% of units sold on Amazon. It's a great business for us. And so some of these things take iterations. If you look at our device portfolio more broadly, our hardware team is doing a great job. You know, the Kindle is now on its 7th generation. The Kindle Voyage, the new kind of premium product, is just completely killer. And you know, Fire TV Stick, we're having trouble building enough. Amazon Echo, which we just launched, we even managed to keep it secret, shocking in the modern era. We didn't build enough of those. We're working on that. So there's a lot of activity going on in our device business. And with the phone, I just ask you to stay tuned.
So what was the mistake with the phone? Or are you saying there's no mistake, we knew it was going to flop?
I think it takes more time to analyze something like that. Again, one of my jobs as the leader of Amazon is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good, it's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets. And you need to encourage that. And if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're going to work. Experiments are, by their very nature, prone to failure. But a few big successes compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. So, you know, bold bets, AWS, Kindle, Amazon Prime, our third-party seller business, all of those things are examples of bold bets that did work, and they pay for a lot of experiments. I've made billions of dollars of failures at Amazon.com, literally billions of dollars of failures. And you might remember Pets.com or Cosmo, or give myself a root canal with no anesthesia very easily. None of those things are fun, but they don't matter. What really matters is companies that don't continue to experiment, companies that don't embrace failure, they eventually get in a desperate position where the only thing they can do is make a kind of Hail Mary bet at the very end of their corporate existence. Whereas companies that are, making bets all along, even, big bets, but not bet the company bets. I don't believe in bet the company bets. That's when you're desperate. That's the last thing you can do.
But we should stay tuned for an evolution of the phone. How long do we have to stay tuned?
Well, it's going to take many iterations. Who knows? Ask me in some number of years.
Let's talk about profit, or in your case, the complete lack thereof, famously.
See, this is Henry's version of being nice to me.
So let's just establish this once and for all. Can Amazon make money?
Well, yes, and in fact we have in the past, and you have to understand there are many ways of thinking about this, but the reality is that Amazon is a collection of several businesses and initiatives, and we have some very significant, very profitable, more established businesses that are free cash flow generating very significantly. And then fortunately, the way I think about it, we have lots of opportunities to invest in new initiatives, and we take advantage of those opportunities. So it's kind of like we built this lemonade stand, 20 years ago. The lemonade stand has become very profitable over time. But we also decided to use our skills and the assets that we've acquired over time to open a hamburger stand and a hot dog stand and so on and so on. So we're investing in new initiatives.
And this is certainly what your investors who've been with you for a long time fervently believe. And you ask them, like, why doesn't it bother you the way it bothers some people that the company's not profitable and has an infinite PE and all this stuff?
Warren Buffett has this great quote. He says, you can hold a rock concert, and that's okay. And you can hold a ballet, and that's okay. Just don't hold a rock concert and advertise it as a ballet. Investors come in all shapes and sizes. They have different investment horizons, different approaches, different beliefs about what the right kind of portfolio looks like. And so it's not one, people use Wall Street as a shorthand, but there isn't one type of investor. They come in all shapes and sizes. And you have to be super clear about what kind of company you're trying to build, what your approach is. We laid that out in our 1997 annual shareholder letter. We said we were going to take big bets. We said they were going to fail. We said some of them hopefully were going to work. We said we were going to invest for the long term, that we were going to try to take advantage of market opportunities as they arose. And there's a certain kind of investor who is aligned with that approach. And so, again, you can hold the ballet or the rock concert, and both can work. Just be clear about which one you are, and then people can self-select.
And so lots of CEOs, I'm sure, would like to learn from you, how is it that I can not be at all profitable and still have an incredibly high stock price by some measures? What is your advice? Is it spend many years explaining we're never going to earn a penny because we're going to be reinvesting it?
I would say, it's very difficult for a publicly traded company to switch. So if you've been holding a rock concert and then you want to have a ballet, that transition is going to be difficult. But if you've done it from the very beginning, and then I think it's not that difficult to do.
So I have been a shareholder for a long, long time, incredibly happy, rode it up in the bubble, rode it all the way down, hung out for those 7 lean years, and then suddenly it takes off like a rocket ship. Very much a believer in the long term, the investment cycle, the big bets, all that stuff. Even I, last quarter, had a little bit of a gulp when I saw the fact that you were not just breaking even anymore, but losing a boatload of money, and in fact, way more than you even said you were going to lose, which I thought was sandbagging. Oh, they just said they're going to lose, and then they're going to come in with a profit, and the stock's going to soar. It was worse than you said. So when do you begin to say, oh, okay, that's it, we've got to rein it in a little bit?
Where's this part where you're extra nice to me because I'm an investor in the company? Is that coming? Because I want to stay around.
I'm asking as a shareholder.
Look, we would all love all of our numbers to be smooth lines up and to the right, and that would be terrific. But that's not how it works. Those numbers are output measures. And I guess you could try to manage your quarterly earnings very precisely, but I think personally that would be a mistake. Most of the work that we put into any particular quarter happened years ago. So it's not, there aren't that many knobs you can turn during a quarter. I mean, you can, but they're like eating your seed corn if you turn those knobs. You don't want to do that. And so people. I think if you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results. So the Benjamin Graham quote here is that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. And I think people are well advised to build a company that wants to be weighed and not voted upon. And that means having good return on invested capital and having lots of free cash flow. But if you said to me, if I said, here's a job I would reject. If somebody came up to me and said, Jeff, I want your job to be to drive up the Amazon stock price and just manage that directly. Now, this might sound ridiculous to some of you, but many companies actually do this. They actually go out and they try to sell the stock. That's kind of the final output. And it's much better to say, okay, let's not do that. That's not going to be sustainable. It's kind of a silly approach. What are the inputs to a higher stock price? And you say, okay, well, free cash flow and return on invested capital are inputs to a higher stock price. Okay, so let's keep working backwards. What are the inputs to free cash flow? And you keep working backwards until you get to something that's controllable. And a controllable input for free cash flow would be something like lower cost structure. And then you back up from there and you say, okay, well, if we can improve our picking efficiency in our fulfillment centers and reduce defects. Defects are very, very costly. It's probably, reducing defects at the root is one of the best ways to lower cost structure. And so then that starts to be a job you would accept. You would say, if you're a reasonable person, you would say, I have no idea how to drive up the stock price. I can't manage that directly. It's not a controllable input. But I can make your picking algorithms more efficient. And that will reduce cost structure. And then follow that chain all along the way. That's what you do in all of these businesses. You want customer obsession. You want to invent your way out of boxes. You want to invent your way into the future. You want to be patient. And you want to have operational excellence so that you're finding defects at the root and fixing them.
You talk about what a lot of CEOs do in terms of trying to drive up the stock price, selling the stock. You told me something when we were outside extraordinary, which is that you spend 6 hours a year on investor relations.
Mm-hmm. And we do a lot of things unusual there. So, we don't meet with our biggest investors. We meet with investors who have low portfolio turns. So, investors that have, many investment funds have very high portfolio turns. They turn their portfolio multiple times per year. They're not really investors, they're traders. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different thing. But where are you going to spend your time and your energy is one of the most important decisions you get to make in life. We all have a limited amount of time, and where you spend it and how you spend it is just an incredibly levered way to think about the world. And so if you're going to spend time, explaining the stock or the company, really, we don't really explain the stock, we explain the company to people. You should do it to people who are long-term investors rather than traders. That's our point of view.
And what do you say to employees when you obviously have some traders in the stock who are not happy and suddenly the stock is down 25% after a quarter?
Well, since 1997, at almost every all-hands meeting, we have 2 all-hands meetings a year. At almost every all-hands meeting, I remind employees that if the stock is up 10% this month, don't feel 10% smarter, because when the stock is down 10% some month, you're going to have to feel 10% dumber, and it's not going to feel as good. And so it's ownership is we give most of our compensation is done in terms of stock compensation, and part and parcel with ownership is a mentality of long-term thinking. Owners think longer term than renters do. So I have a friend who rented his house to some tenants, and instead of getting a Christmas tree stand at Christmas, they just nailed the Christmas tree into the hardwood floors of the house. No owner would ever do that. And but sometimes that's a bad tenant. They're good tenants, but that's a bad tenant, and it's because this is the same old thing about nobody ever washed a rental car, and you take better care of the things that you own, but one of the responsibilities of ownership, and definitely deep inside the Amazon culture, is to think about the fundamentals of the business and not the daily fluctuations in the stock price. There's no information in it.
more than pretty much any other company I've ever seen, since the dawn of Amazon, you've had a chorus of doomsayers and doubters. You're going to go out of business. Famously, in the 1990s, you were supposed to be broke any month now, so forth. Now, the story is, well, the growth is slowing, the stock is going down. At Amazon, they pay everybody with stock. They have such low salaries. There's just going to be an exodus now that the stock is moving sideways. How do you, again, have your employees feel like, I should stay here instead of the 900 other places that I could work? Because over the long haul,
you got to
it'll
be
work.
somewhat quantitative about this. I mean, I went through, I think that when the internet bubble burst, the stock went from $113 a share to somewhere around six.
Bingo.
And so
I remember.
Now to me, that is a stock movement. And so what people are talking about now is the stock. I think if you look at our stock price over a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it all looks pretty good. I mean, people. So it's just not quantitatively. Our stock is well within. It's a volatile stock. It always has been. It probably will be for we're we're a large company, but in many ways, because of all of our emerging businesses, we're also still a startup. And there's just a lot of volatility in startups.
If you go to Silicon Valley now, where they're competing fiercely for talent, it's basically like any company you go into, like a Disney cruise. They have the sushi chefs and the free this and the massages and all that stuff. I visited Amazon last year. I was startled to see that you make employees pay for lunch. It seems such an archaic concept. Famously frugal, low salaries, everything else.
Yeah,
How do you do that? How do you get great people to work for you?
If you ever talking to some college student who you really care about, maybe a niece or a nephew, you should definitely advise them the best way to pick your job is who has the best massages.
It seems to work.
That'll be great advice. You'll really lead them in the right direction for the rest of their career. First of all, I'll give you some examples. We do have some very significant benefits at Amazon, besides compensation and restricted stock units and so on and so on. For example, we have an urban campus. It's way more expensive. We could save a lot of money by moving to the suburbs of Seattle. And we have chosen instead to build an urban campus. And I think it's a spectacular benefit for our employees. I think it's one that they appreciate much more than free massages. And I'll give you some startling statistics. 15% of our employees at headquarters live in the same zip code where they work. 20% of our employees walk to work. So an urban campus is so much greener than a suburban campus because people aren't driving and parking and fighting traffic as much. And it's also just way more vibrant, which I personally believe also helps Amazon because it keeps people connected with this vibrant urban area. They're not insulated. We have an unbelievable food truck scene around our headquarters. It's out of control, actually, how many, and if everybody just came in and had, Amazon authorized food, and there would be no food truck scene. There would be no vibrancy. There would be no connection. So we have windows that open in our buildings. That's unbelievable. Hard to do. It's really hard to do. You have to work at it. The HVAC people hate it. They're like, no, you can't open the windows. Then people say, well, what if people leave the windows open while it's raining? I say, well, what if they put bugs in our code? It's like if somebody's gonna leave the windows open when it's raining, at least that'll be visible. That's what all these strange objections. But people, it turns out, really like fresh air. So even though it's complicated to get to have people have control of their own windows, and it complicates the HVAC system, it's worth doing. And in a mild climate like Seattle, it's also very green. We let people bring their dogs to work. Again, some of these things are complicated, but they're all manageable. We have 150,000 employees, 20,000 or so at headquarters in Seattle, And I think in 17 years of having dogs at the office, or 18 years of having dogs at the office, we've had like a handful of times where some dog has been, banished because it wasn't polite enough. And so it's, so I guess I kind of reject the premise. I think we have great amenities for employees. They're just not the same as what, kind of what some other companies do, and those are fine too. I don't even claim our way is the right way. I just claim it's ours.
How dependent is Amazon on you these days? You famously had a very terrifying experience in a helicopter. Last year, you had a very terrifying experience in the Galapagos.
The kidney stone was just painful. It turned out it's not dangerous once you know what you have. Before you know about it,
you think you're dying.
I think you're going to die for sure. Don't recommend that. Stay hydrated. Anyway, the question is, my opinion is that I can do some things that Amazon would be hard for other people to do only because of my history with the company. And as the company has grown, of course, my job has changed very much. And it has, my main job today is I'm kind of I work hard at helping to maintain the culture. A culture of high standards, of operational excellence, of inventiveness, of willingness to fail, willingness to make bold experiments. I'm the counterbalance to the institutional no who can say yes. But I won't. I'm not going to be here forever. Amazon is a really many of the traits that make Amazon unusual are now deeply ingrained in the culture. In fact, if I wanted to change them, I couldn't. If I decided tomorrow that I wish Amazon did less pioneering and more close following, I couldn't do it. The culture cultures are self-reinforcing, and that's a good thing. The people who come to the company, we get sometimes people come to the company and they find Amazon very boring because we don't have enough, competitive zeal. We don't wake up. Some annual planning processes and some companies literally start with who are our 3 biggest enemies, and then here's how we're going to hold them at bay or defeat them. And we don't have such a list at Amazon. It's not how our annual planning process works. And so, but if you're on the other hand, if you're the kind of person who gets up in the morning and says in the shower time, what can we invent for customers and what can we do differently and how can we improve that experience and so on, then it's going to be a playground. I still run into work, by the way. I took my family on vacation to France, my wife's extended family. There were about 20 of us. And we had an unbelievably good time. Great food, everything. We were there for a week. I got back to Seattle and I ran into the office. I'm having so much fun.
Is there a succession plan?
Yeah, there's a succession plan for me and for all of our senior executives.
So there is somebody who would take over?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who?
Secret.
Secret. Okay. A person who would be entrusted with a lot. Hachette.
Hachette.
You just had a very famously public, bitter fight with Hachette. A couple of questions. One, over the price at which you were allowed to sell their books, I believe. First of all, were you surprised at the amount of animosity that was directed at Amazon?
Well, my view is, in this incident and actually in our entire history, I think we've been treated extraordinarily well by the press and the media, certainly by customers. So I have no complaints. I'm very, very, I think we've been just treated way above average over time, and I'm grateful for that. Retailers negotiating and fighting with suppliers is not a new phenomenon. Rarely does it break through into kind of a public fight, and mostly it's not. But it's an essential job of any retailer to negotiate hard on behalf of customers, and that's what we do. And
so if you
have
could
to keep doing that, it's part of our job.
If there was no negotiation and you could dictate to everybody exactly what the terms were going to be, what would the future be for authors?
So the most important thing, when you're thinking about books, the most important thing is constantly encouraging, the kind of incumbent, participants in the book industry to think this way. The most important thing to observe is that you have to draw the box big. Books don't just compete against books. Books compete against people reading blogs and news articles and playing video games and watching TV and going to see movies. Books are the competitive set for leisure time, and it takes many hours to read a book. It's a lot. It's a big commitment, and if you narrow your field of view and only think about books competing against books, you make really bad decisions. And so what we really have to do, if we want a healthy culture of long-form reading, and you have to differentiate between short-form reading and long-form reading. If you want a healthy culture of reading, book-length things, you've got to make books more accessible. And part of that is making them less expensive. Books, in my view, are too expensive. $30 for a book is too expensive. And so, if you just think, well, I'm only competing against other $30 books, then you don't get there. But if you realize that you're really competing against, Candy Crush and everything, then you start to say, well, gosh, maybe we should really work on reducing friction on long-form reading. And that's what that's what Kindle has been about from the very beginning. We humans co-evolve with our tools. We change our tools, and then our tools change us. And in the internet era, and almost all of the tools for reading have been reducing the friction of short-form reading. The internet is perfect for delivering 3 paragraphs to your smartphone. And but the Kindle is trying to reduce friction for reading a whole book, and it's working. The vision for Kindle is every book ever in print in any language, all available in 60 seconds. And that's a multi-decade vision. We've been working on it for a decade now, and we've made huge progress. And so we're making books easier to get, more affordable, more accessible. It's a fantastic mission. The Kindle team is very dedicated to it, and they're doing a great job. And that is you are going to get more reading. Friction, if you want to do more of something, make the friction less. If you want to do less of something, make the friction more. If there's a particular snack food that you like a lot and it's making you fat, put it on the top shelf where it's harder to get to, and you'll eat less of it. So don't leave it on your kitchen counter.
Which sounds great until it comes to the author who kind of wants to write a book but can't quit their job unless they have the nice advance from the big rich publisher who you are quietly demolishing.
No, publishers, but the facts are wrong. Publishers are having unparalleled profitability. The book industry is in better shape than it ever has been, and it's due to ebooks. So if you think about how much the Kindle team deserves a significant amount of credit for that. Because they were early, they got ahead of it. There's been very little piracy in ebooks, unlike other kinds of digital media. They have, there's a thriving a la carte payment mechanism, again, because it got in there early. So there's a really good, this is a good news story for publishers and for authors. Some of this is it's very difficult for incumbents who have a sweet thing to accept change. Even, it's just very difficult. It's very easy, but almost always incorrect, to glamorize the past. And it's easy to do. We all have sort of they're kind of fake memories of how great things used to be. And yeah, right, before penicillin, things were awesome.
Yeah.
And that's true. Mostly everything is getting better. Undoubtedly there are exceptions, but mostly things have gotten better. And we live in a world where I hope things continue to get better. And surely making reading more affordable is not going to make authors less money. Making reading more affordable is going to make authors more money.
So our sand is running through the hourglass with you, so we can move on. So competition. So I have always heard, I think from you, but from many others, focus. It's so hard to be good at one thing. Just do one thing. I believe Apple preaches this, and do it great. Let me remind you of some of the things you're doing. There's your completely massive and globally dominant commerce business, first party and third party. There is AWS, Amazon Web Services, which came out of nowhere and is now massive. You're in the hardware business, including Echo and Kindle and the phone, grocery delivery, payments, TV shows. You're now making TV shows, advertising. Jeff, how can you possibly do all of that?
Henry, you're exhausting me.
How can you possibly do all of that and do it okay? Even okay, let alone good.
So I think one way to think about this is, what are you really focusing on? So, I'm focusing on those things that I think make Amazon unusual. Genuine customer obsession. So like every single thing you just mentioned, when our senior executives sit down and review those programs, they're looking for customer obsession. How is it? Second one that we're focused on is invention. We don't like to do Me Too offerings. We'll be inspired by something we see in the world. We're not hermetically sealed, but we want to put our own twist on it. We want to try to do something better for customers that's pioneering. So where is the invention? Why is this going to be better for customers than whatever is serving that need in the world today? And then a willingness to think long term. So I'm very focused on those things, and also the operational excellence, reducing defects at their root. Those are the things. That's the culture of Amazon. It's the habits that we have. Those are the things I'm focused on, and those are the things that all of our senior people are focused on. They've been at the company for a long time, and I'm incredibly lucky because I get to work with what are effectively paid volunteers. The senior team at Amazon, most of them have been in the company for 10 plus years, and they've ridden the stock appreciation of Amazon. They can all go, sip pina coladas on a beach for the rest of their life if they want to, and I'm very grateful to them that they choose not to, because they do it because it's fun, and we're building things. We have so many talented people, and the common thread in all of those things is our approach. And so, Amazon Web, I would definitely advise a small startup company to be as narrow and as focused as is possible to be. If you look at the original Amazon business plan, there was no hint of anything other than books in it, and it was not on my radar. I was thinking I wanted to build an online bookstore. That was it. And it worked way better than I thought it would, and we launched music, and that worked better than I thought it would, and we launched videos. I think it's so long ago I can really remember. I think it was actually VHS tapes. Is that possible? And that worked better than we thought it would. And then I sent email to customers. So I picked about 1,000 customers, and I said, besides the things we sell today, books, music, and video, what would you like to see us sell? And the list came back incredibly long tail. It was almost like whatever was on their mind at the moment. It was like, I wish you sold windshield wipers for my car. And I was like, really? Windshield wipers? That wasn't on the business plan, but that's an interesting idea. And so today, basically, if you're buying your windshield wipers anywhere else, you're probably getting ripped off. So it's been, kind of one foot in front of the other. And then sometimes, we expand into new areas in two ways. One is kind of, from a customer need. We will work from a customer need to the skills that we need. And the other one is skills forward, from a skill set we have to a new set of customers. So Kindle is an example of a customer need, and so we don't have any hardware skills. We've been doing this for 10 years now. But we'll go back if you go back in time 10 years, we had no hardware team. We had to hire somebody to lead our hardware group, and then build a hardware team and build some institutional competence at it, and so on. That's a customer need backwards approach. And then skills forward, a great example of that is Amazon Web Services. We had the skills to do AWS. We had probably more distributed computing expertise than anybody else in the world because of the transactions. Transaction systems are so complicated and hard to build, and we had a service-oriented architecture of great complexity, probably before anybody else. And so we could kind of, because we were doing that, we could kind of see the future a little bit, and decided to build AWS, which has turned into a huge business in its own right. And that is, if you were always, business is very situational, and so rules of thumb are good, but they have to be applied to the right situation. So sometimes the old maxim that you should stick to the knitting is correct, but sometimes the adage that you should stick to the knitting is wrong. And a senior leader's job is to figure out in which situation are you.
Drones. You had this amazing commercial on 60 Minutes last year at this time about this fantastic future when drones are going to fly out and bring me my package and it's going to be right there. And immediately, everybody in the country and probably around the world was saying, great, when?
Yeah.
When?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. Technology is not going to be the long pole. The long pole is going to be regulatory. And in fact, I just went and met with the Primaire team and saw like the 10th or 11th generation of drone. I can't remember, flying around in the cage. And it's truly remarkable. I mean, a lot of this is it's not just the physical airframe and electric motors and so on and so on. The most interesting part of this is the autopilot and the guidance and control and the machine vision systems that make it all work. But the long pole in this tent is going to be regulatory, and that is very difficult to predict. I bet you the Primaire team, the ratio of lawyers to engineers on the Primaire team is probably the highest at Amazon.
Is this a situation where everyone else in the world except Americans is going to get drone deliveries?
I think it is sad but possible that the U.S. could be late. It's highly likely that other countries will do it first. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I may be too skeptical. I hope I'm wrong.
You turned 50 recently.
Yeah.
Any change outlook on life?
No, not really. I'm still dancing into the office. I love my life. I have 4 kids. My wife claims to still like me. I don't question her aggressively on that. I do the dishes every night, and I can see that actually makes her like me. It's a very odd thing.
I do that too.
I'm pretty convinced it's like the sexiest thing I do.
You had a book written about you recently at Amazon.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yes, I read it.
And?
I think, I could say many things, but I would say that the first half of the book does an extraordinarily good job of capturing the culture of Amazon in the early days. Very, very good. I would also say that, I get way too much credit in the book. There are a lot of people who have played huge roles in Amazon's history, and they're kind of almost completely left out or just barely mentioned. And so, I don't know, maybe someday I'll write that book and make sure that those people get their credit.
Your wife reacted to the book with an incredibly long defense on Amazon as a comment, incredibly well written, say, "This is not my husband." Who was right? I mean, it sucks to have stuff written about you.
You don't think I'm going to sit up here on stage and tell you my wife is wrong?
There we go.
Henry, I don't even know where you're going.
What was she objecting to?
Well, she was there in the early days, and look, you've been a public figure. You still are, but you had more public figureness in your earlier, stock analyst days. I've been a public figure. You get used to everything being wrong about you. It's sort of, anytime you think you know a public figure from their media, you really don't. It's very. I've gotten to know several public figures. You don't know them. You can't tell that Bill Gates is an amazing dad. I know that. But it's very hard. But other people, like my wife, she doesn't have as much experience with this. And so, I'm like, doesn't matter.
Fair enough. What do you like as a dad?
Me? Let's see.
Boring?
Well,
Work all the time?
What am I? I have 3 boys and a girl. The oldest is 14. He was the last person in his class to get a smartphone, which he reminded me of frequently. When the second to last person got a smartphone, he sent an email message to all of his classmates that said, "And then there was one." And and all my kids are very, very different. They're, it's pretty amazing. We spend a lot of time together as a family. I don't travel very much. One of the reasons I do so little of what I'm doing here today on stage is because I like to be at home, and I like to be in the office. I feel disconnected from the office if I'm traveling a lot. I probably travel less than 20% of the time, maybe less than 10% of the time. And I organize my life that way. It's because, it's kind of a personal preference. I prefer not to travel, so I've organized my life so I don't have to. I always tell our most senior executives at Amazon, because you're a senior executive, you have more control over your environment, and you should have less stress. If senior executives are saying, "I'm so stressed out," I tell them, look, you shouldn't be stressed out. Stress comes from a lack of control. And you should because you're a senior exec, you have more control of your environment. Figure out what it is that's causing you stress, and figure out how to do less of it. Bring somebody on your team who's good at that or who likes doing it, and have them shore you up in that regard. So I'm very, very lucky. I'm lucky in so many ways, but I won a lot of lotteries in life, and I'm not just talking about Amazon. It's a certain kind of financial lottery for sure. But I have won so many lotteries. I mean, my parents are both amazing role models. My grandfather, my mom had me when she was 17, which she says, "Don't do that. It's not her reco." Her dad had to fight to keep her in high school. She had a pregnant mother in high school in the 1960s in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Difficult situation. And so, but, I have had so many good, my dad was hardworking. He worked for Exxon for 33 years. And so, that's, in life, we get a lot of, rolls of the dice. And one of the big rolls of the dice is, who are your early role models? And so I try to do that for my kids.
Washington Post. So you may not know this, but no one knows how to get to you. So when they have questions about what you're doing at the Washington Post, they come to me, which is interesting. I answer as best I can. Why did you buy the Washington Post?
Well, first of all, I was not seeking to buy a newspaper. I wasn't like out there, in the market for, pounding the pavement. Anybody got a newspaper for sale? I was approached through an intermediary by Don Graham, and as it happens, I've been friends with Don Graham for about 15 years now. And I was very surprised when I got the phone call, and I said, why would I even be a candidate to buy the Post? I don't know anything about the newspaper business, and that was my biggest concern. I went through a few gates before deciding to buy the Post. One of them was, is it an important institution? And that was an easy gate to go through. It is, and I wanted, and for that reason I wanted to help. But the second one was, is it hopeless? Because I also didn't want to do it if it just couldn't possibly work. And I finally convinced myself I became very optimistic, and actually in the intervening year I've gotten even more optimistic. So I'm very optimistic about the future of the Post. But if it weren't an important institute, I wouldn't want to, for example, there are financial difficulties in all newspapers because of the radical disruption that the internet has caused to traditional newspapers. It used to be that, if you were a one newspaper town, that thing was a printing press for money. It was just the newspapers in one newspaper towns just spun off cash, huge amounts of cash. And that's just not true anymore. The world has completely changed. And advertisers have tons of options for how to reach people in local areas, and so there's many. We could talk for an hour on just that topic. It's a very interesting one. But the internet has radically disrupted traditional newspapers, and so there's a lot of invention and experimentation to be done to put that. And so Don finally convinced me after many conversations that even though I didn't know anything about the newspaper business, I did know something about the internet and something about companies reacting to the internet and how those knobs work. And so that combined with the financial runway that I can provide to the Post is the reason that I bought the company. And I'm glad I did. I have had a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot. The team is great. That's the other thing I wanted to really understand before I did it, because not knowing anything about the newspaper business, I was like, well, do we have a good editor? I was like, yes, check. Okay, good. Because those kinds of things, if you have to go in, there are two reasons why a company, the Post was, has shrank a lot, kind of over the last 6 years, and in terms of revenue, and also in terms of employee count in the newsroom and in other places. So I wanted to be sure that we still had a good team. I didn't want to have to walk in and find that the team was all a shambles. That I just didn't have confidence in my ability to fix that. So great team, including the technology team. In fact, you guys should. There's a panel today. Shailesh, who leads all of technology at the Washington Post, is speaking today. I think at 4:00 on Old Dogs, New Tricks, or something like that. Shailesh is amazing. So he's just an example of the leadership team that we have in place at the Post.
Why are you more optimistic? Nobody else is optimistic about newspapers.
Well, I'm optimistic because of some of the changes that we've seen in online readership, and that curve is moving in the right direction. And the big change that we're making at the Post is, the Post was always, even though it had a national and global reputation, the product was a local product, and that was by design. And I think for the time it was a very good strategy, and the Post as a business was super successful for decades. But that is what we're changing. We are in the process of remaking the Post in that way, so that it can also be. We will continue to do good local coverage in Washington D.C. But the Post has the good fortune of being the newspaper of the capital city of the United States of America, and that's a great starting point to be a national and even a global publication. So that's the thing that's changing, and the newsroom is doing an amazing job embracing that change. You can't change something like the Post without the newsroom. You can't just change it from the business side. It's got to be everything, and you can't, like, if a restaurant had a line out the door for 20 years, and then one day that line has dwindled and nobody's coming to the restaurant anymore, you can't fix it without help from the chef. It's got to be the whole team working on it, and I have been super impressed.
We've used up our time. Let me ask you just one more question, though. You, in addition to everything else that we've talked about, make rockets.
Yeah.
You want to go into space.
Yes.
This is a proclivity that you share with
Right.
fellow billionaires like Elon Musk and Richard Branson and so forth. First of all, what is it about space that captivates you? Second, what are you doing that's different? And third, just talk about how hard it is. We just saw Richard have an accident that has set everybody back for a long time. But talk about space. What's the vision there?
Well, first of all, and probably most fundamentally, you don't get to choose your passions. Your passions choose you. And for whatever reason, when I was 5 years old, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. I was imprinted with this passion for space and for exploration, and I think it's important. I could come up with lots of rational reasons why it's important, and I really do believe them. We humans have. I think it's probably a survival skill that we're curious and like to explore, and I think our ancestors who were incurious and failed to explore probably didn't live as long as the ones who were like looking over the next mountain range to see if there were, more sources of food and better climates and so on and so on. So we are really evolved to be pioneers, and for good reason. So, new worlds have a way of, you can't predict how or why or when, but new worlds have a way of saving old worlds. And that's how it should be. We need the frontier. We need people moving out into space. My vision is I want to see millions of people living and working in space. And I think it's important. But I also just love it. I love change. I love technology. I love the engineers that we have at Blue Origin. They're brilliant. We have about 350 people there. We're building a vertical takeoff, vertical landing vehicle. It takes off like a regular rocket, and it lands on its tail like a Buck Rogers rocket. The initial mission is suborbital space tourism. We're also designing a orbital vehicle. We just won a contract to provide the new engines for the new version of the Atlas V, which is the most successful launch vehicle in history. It's a Boeing-Lockheed joint venture, and that vehicle uses Russian engines, and because of all the things that are happening in Ukraine and so on, that supply of engines has become less certain, so they want to switch away from a Russian-made engine, and they chose Blue Origin to provide that engine. So it's a very exciting endeavor, great team. They're just doing a wonderful job, and it's fun.
When are you going?
I don't know. I mean, when we're ready. And so, our vehicle, I like our architecture. We have the vehicle can fly autonomously. So throughout the entire test program, it flies all by itself and comes and lands all by itself. So we don't need test pilots, which is good during a development phase. The crew capsule uses a full envelope escape architecture. So if you go back in time, all rockets had escape systems, Apollo and Soyuz. The space shuttle was really the first human-rated vehicle not to have an escape system, and that was a mistake. It needed an escape system, and so our vehicle has a full envelope escape system. So I like the architecture we're building. I'm excited about it, but this is not a business where you can rush things or cut corners. Our motto at Blue Origin is gradatum ferocitor. It stands for step by step ferociously. And so we're just one step at a time.
Jeff, huge privilege and a pleasure to have
Thank
you.
you, Henry.
Thank you so much. And thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.